welcome to Legally Speaking with me, Tarun Nangia. Today we're going to discuss an important issue that covers almost every businessman, self-employed professional in India, which is parallel proceedings by center and state GST against a person or an individual or an entity. How does it impact and is it legally allowed? All that and much more on today's show. And I have a very interesting panel with me. Let me welcome Mr. Rakesh Nangia, who's chairman of Nangia Anderson India Private Limited. Good to see you, Mr. Nangia, and thank you for your time. I have with me senior advocate Sachit Jolly, who joins me. He's directly walked in from the Supreme Court to my show. Good to see you, Mr. Jolly, and look forward to some interesting insights. Advocate Aditya Ajgaonkar joins us from the Bombay High Court in Mumbai. He's based and deals a lot with financial crime issues and also taxation issues. Good to see you, Aditya, and thank you for your time. At the outset, let me request Mr. Rakesh Nangia, chairman of Nangia Anderson India, to give his inputs on this issue as an opening comment, and then we go to the others people. Over to you, Mr. Nangia.
Thank you, Tarun. Good evening, everyone, panelists, and good evening, all the people viewing the show. See, Tarun, what has happened? You see the uniqueness in the India GST model. Basically, India has a unique federal nature of the taxes. And especially you see the GST, there is a state, all the taxes are not collected by the center, which is divided between the state and the center in an equal proportion or whatever the proportion is there. Now, what happens is this is there are a number of times what happens when the state is touching the same subject, the center is touching the same subject, their parallel proceedings gets initiated between the state and the center. So the proceedings on the same subject matter may be carried by the state, proceedings on the same subject matter can be carried on by the center. So what happens actually? You find first there's a multiplicity, duplicacy of the proceedings. Then on the same proceedings, two people can take a different action, can be different wavelength, different thought process, basically, different assessment, different demands. There can be humongous issues coming out of it. So what is the legal position? What is it a taxpayer should do when on the same return there are two authorities, state and the center, are levying you taxes or holding a position or holding the assessment at a different level, and the taxpayer is running from pillar to post, two appeals, and all those multiplicity of proceedings, duplication of tax deposited, and a huge problem for the taxpayer is concerned. So first of all, let me tell you one thing. Is there a legal bar between on both the center and state GST authorities, basically proceeding against the same taxpayer on the same issue? First, what is the legal position is concerned? Yes, the Act does explicitly provide parallel proceedings on the same subject matter by both the center and the state authorities. That clearly bars the parallel proceedings. This law is very, very clear on that. But if one authority, here's the caveat, have initiated the proceeding, the other is prohibited from doing so on the same issue. Now, this is the first saving grace. This ensures that the taxpayer is not burdened by duplicate notices and assessment of the same facts. Now, here the second question comes. What do you mean by same subject matter? What do you mean by same proceedings? There's a very thin line to decide whether both authorities can do the initiated or not. Subject matter refers to the same cause of action. So if there's the same cause of action, such as the same tax period, transaction, or issue, then there's the same cause of action. A proceedings typically means adjudication, assessment, like a show cause notice or demand order. So there's a clear difference between both of things. Courts have clarified that mere inquiries, there can be inquiry by the central government, there can be inquiry by the state government, basically, like audits, summons, do not count as proceedings. So both authorities can issue you notices, both authority can sort certain information. But if it is a subject matter, can you call this as a parallel proceedings or not? So there is a relief which is provided in the Act, basically, where both authorities cannot proceed against the taxpayer on the same subject matter or on the same proceedings. This is very important. Just to add to that, can both center and state issue GST summons? Now, MSSC, can they both issue summons or conduct audit on the same time, at the same time? The law says technically they can. This is very important. Technically they can. The courts have held that audits or summons are not barred. Very important matter, are not barred because they are considered preliminary inquiries. If these preliminary inquiries can be done by both the authorities. However, two separate demand notices for the same issue is not allowed. So this is a very clear distinction. But what happens? Authorities step it over. And you find they cross this thin line by interpretation or misinterpretation. And then the taxpayer suffers from the dual proceedings from the state and the center is concerned. So in practice, it's best only one authority should take the lead to avoid the harassment and confusion on for all the further proceedings.
And point very well taken. Thank you for that opening comment. I go to Advocate Aditya Ajgaonkar, who joins us from Bombay. I correct myself, from Mumbai, and for his opening comment.
Firstly, thank you for having me here with such an erudite panel. As Rakesh ji already said, he's pretty much covered the law, right? Uh, Unfortunately, what happens with GST is that we have taken a huge set of diverse laws, because all states had power to tax, the center had power to tax, indirect taxes as we call it, and we have put it into one and rolled it out. Teething issues were expected and were there, but now we are more than 7-8 years into GST happening, and these issues shouldn't be happening. But when I actually try to research on this subject, I realized most of the high courts have at least one order on this issue. Right. So as Rakesh ji said, it's very clear that the law is extremely clear that both of them cannot assess for the same period on the same subject matter. Unfortunately, this is happening, and this is happening fairly regularly, and it is happening across the board, across the country, because very honestly, businesses are no longer very local. So you may have one office in Bangalore, you may have one office in Mumbai, you may have one office in Delhi. Your trades may happen, your supply of goods and services may be taking place from one workplace to another. Your supply may be to a different state, and this may come to the notice of an authority that is not necessarily where your corporate office is based or where your tax team is based. And that information, once a certain amount of inquiry is conducted, gets shared across the network, as it should be, right, to ensure that people do not wiggle out of the GST net. But after that, what we very often see is notices being sent out. And we have come across cases where officers who have been informed and intimated very specifically that the center or the state has actually taken this action or initiated this action still go ahead with the assessment. In fact, there are cases, if we actually look at the judgments on this issue, there are cases where an assessment order is passed and is already appealed against, and the appeal is pending. And even after that, a fresh assessment order is done. And I think this is one of those teething issues that really needs to be, sorted out. Another problem is, of course, the practical implication. One part is the business side of it, but there is also a legal implication to it, because even as of today, unfortunately, though I hear that it's going to start very, soon, there is no GST tribunal, right? So everything is going to the High Court in a writ. Whenever such sort of issues are coming up, you're going to the High Court in a writ, and that adds a lot to the High Court docket. Something that should have been pretty much handled at an officer level. And I think this is something that really needs to be ironed out. Another issue that I see is that so the center, the CBIC, has come out with specific guidelines on this issue, saying that if there is an proceeding that is taken out by your counterpart somewhere, you should not be duplicating it. But it's not necessarily that all the states have come out with those guidelines. And another problem is, though the statute provides that the statute is just says everything in one paragraph. As we know, the regulatory guidelines are equally important. The states have not necessarily incorporated these, and there are High Court judgments that say that CBIC guidelines, the central guidelines, may not be applicable on the state ones. So it is leading to quite a bit of churn, I think, in litigation. And I think, this needs to be looked at fairly seriously.
Okay, thank you for that opening comment. I'll go to Senior Advocate Sachit Jolly for his opening comment on this issue.
Thank you, Tarun. Thank you for having me, and with such an erudite panel. I think Mr. Nangia, with whom I never disagree, and Aditya, I think they've covered amongst themselves most of it. I have a slightly different take, Tarun, on what will constitute proceedings, because like Mr. Nangia and Aditya said, that there can't be parallel proceedings. But some of the judgments, particularly from Rajasthan and Bombay, seem to be saying that proceedings are only when a show cause notice is issued. the earlier summons, everything else before that is not proceeding. Now, I have a slightly divergent view from that. I don't think that's correct. And I'll tell you for two reasons. One, Section 66 of the CGST says you can search any person, you can raid a person in common parlance, let's say. Now, are we therefore saying that both central and state authorities can search me on the same thing whenever they want? And even after the center has searched me under 67, can the state also search me on that for the same proposition? That will be undue harassment. So therefore, according to me, proceeding has to be given a broader context and a broader definition. Even section 70 of the CGST says you can call me for summons. Now, let's say there is an allegation against me as a company that I have availed fraudulent input tax credit. Worst allegation against me. Now, the state authority calls my director, records his statement that you've taken a fraudulent input tax credit. Statement is recorded. Now, will the center again call me for that under 70 and say, I want to also record your statement? Now, that is never ending, because then if I have units in 20 states, then every state in 20 of these, every officer in 20 of these states will call me. They will also call me in center. And when at their own sweet time, one of them decides to issue a show cause, then the agony ends. According to me, that's not how you should read proceedings under section 6 of the CGST or the SGST state levies. So it has to be given a schematic interpretation. You have to avoid double harassment on the same subject matter. So therefore, it has to be read in that manner. Secondly, I think you would have seen, Tarun, more than us tax people, our horizons are very narrow. There are multiple FIRs these days. Some comedian says something. There are multiple FIRs in every country, every state. The Supreme Court has been very categorical. You can't prosecute everybody in every state. You centralize the investigation in one state, do it. So my view is that, I think the board, CBIC, should take a pragmatic view of this. One authority has started it. Please consolidate. There is no fun in calling directors of companies to every nook and corner of the country and saying, please record your statement here, please record your statement there. Ultimately, he's going to say the same thing. In fact, in the second statement, he may improve his case. He's not going to make a mess of his earlier case. He would have read his statement. So, it really doesn't take us anywhere. I think it's a waste of time and energy for businessmen. It's a waste of time and energy for tax-paid money, which is spent on the officers. So really, according to me, it's a complete waste of time and money.
Thank you. Thank you for that opening comment and that insight. We'll go to Mr. Rakesh Nangia. You had to say something, and I have to ask you something about when there are investigations by different wings of the same department, audit versus investigation, audit department and investigation wing. You could bring in that into your answer.
I just need to add basically what Sachin mentioned, how the proceeding has been defined under the law. Proceedings typically means adjudication or assessment, which are like a show cause notice or demand, or where the court has held it. You may be right. You can, as a lawyer, you can have a more aggressive position. You can take it, and the court may interpret the way what you're saying it, not the way what I'm saying it. But courts have clarified that mere inquiries like audits or summons actually do not count as proceedings. That's a very important thing. Now the question came when two state and the center both have issued a notice. Who will have a right? So the court held whoever issued the first notice. If the state issued the first notice, the jurisdiction goes to the state. If the center issued it, then it goes to the center. So that was another very important thing that happened. And in one of the cases that happened, what happened if DGCI issued you the notices? What happens in such a case? So then the DGCI, is it a proceedings or is it what should happen? So there have been courts of judgment, umpteen judgment, but majority of the judgments say there cannot be parallel proceedings there, rightly. That is very, very clear. And the courts have given the benefit more in the favor of the SSC's taxpayer rather than the state is concerned. Because they say that two authorities, there is no parallel and under any sense going against the taxpayer on same ground or same issues concerned. So this is first is there. And very important was happened when there was again, I was talking with the DGCI, there was a case which happened of Delhi High Court, Amit Gupta versus Union of India. And here they say for the purpose to avoid duplication, reiterated that section 6(2)(b) is to avoid duplication, not to rigidly prevent centralized investigation by an authorized officer. So this has been held by the Delhi High Court is concerned. And just to add a little bit more uh, is this problem new under the GST, new under the GST? How was it under the previous GST regime like VAT or service tax was concerned? So basically this is thing. So earlier, basically there was a state subject, one was a central subject. What happened? This issue is unique to the GST because it is a dual levy which is administered by the both central state. Under pre-GST, like excise duty, VAT, each tax operated in a separate domain. So there was a parallel multiple proceedings carrying on. So much there were overlaps rarely occurred because everybody was issuing the notices. So it was you didn't have this was one of the most ease in terms to ensure whether state or center, either of them can go against you. Not every authorities, which has happened in the past. And GST brought a very unified tax base, but retained dual control. That was the most vulnerable, which is why safeguard like Section 6.2 became very much essential. I missed the question which Tarun, you asked me.
What I was requesting you to tell me is the investigation wing and the audit wing, both sort of.
So the question comes: is it a proceedings or it is an inquiry? What is inquiry actually? Can we say technically? One of the proceedings are carried on, can you demand other authorities by going to the court once proceedings are over? It can be a different subject matter. It can be the different year. So there can be a possibility they may carry on the investigation and pass it on to the jurisdictional authorities. But can they do that actually? Answer is yes, they can do it and they can do it. Until unless it's the same year, same subject matter, same issue. Then you can only be inquired in one place, you can't do it other place. But if 1 year, the subject matter is different, you can ask.
Point very well taken. I'll go to Advocate Aditya Ajgaonkar for his intervention.
So first, let me start out by saying that for the sake of the taxpayer, people like Rakesh ji and Sachit can hopefully convince the court that Sachit's interpretation of the law is the right one, because I think that will give a lot of relief to a lot of people. And I hope to have a small part to play in that too, because we are all in different jurisdictions. We can't stop being lawyers, because that is ideally how it should be. Because typically we have to figure out why this 6.2b is so strong. It is also so strong because when an officer conducts an assessment under GST, he does not do it only for the state or for the center. He levies tax on behalf of both. He quantifies the state tax as well as the central tax. So what will happen is that if another officer from another authority, say if from the center or the state, does the whole thing again, it is a duplication of exercise, which is, I mean, we keep looking at it from a taxpayer's point of view, but even with respect to government resources point of view, it is not necessarily the best allocation, because you're duplicating a lot of work and one of them has to go. Both of them cannot be sustained. And looking at the broad taxpayer base and looking at the GST collections, etc., I don't think we should be, necessarily looking at duplication as a good thing. Another aspect is, I'll throw out a fairly controversial statement out here, but as of today, GST officers have perhaps a lot of power. I mean, if you actually look at among tax authorities, I think they have pretty much the highest amount of power. At one point of time, ED had under FERA. Okay, but now FERA is not there, though technically it's not a tax statute. Now ED has under PMLA, which is known. But I think GST has changed the color of how people look at tax authorities also, because the powers that GST has, right? If you look at it, they have powers to provisionally freeze your bank account. They have powers to arrest beyond a certain threshold. They can, if they want, pretty much bring a business to a standstill, right? And again, now you superimpose that with what Sachit said, that it could be multiple states. And any of those officers still has the power to do this, right? It's not just one person. If I have business in 5 states, and if the provisional attachment is done by one officer in a state, my bank accounts across the board will be frozen. My business will come to an absolute standstill, right? I think that is the importance of dual proceedings not happening. at some point of time, perhaps the legislature will have to intervene and come up with a similar protection, even with respect to investigation. I do not honestly know whether that view will be taken by courts with the legislation as it stands today, very honestly. Because at no point of time would leakage of revenue be a good scenario for anybody. But it right now carries with it a lot of hassle. It carries with it a lot of duplication if, of course, double notices do happen. Because typically, we are looking at one agency starting the investigation, and based on that investigation, another authority has issued a show cause notice. Now, the authority who has started the investigation is possibly even better acquainted with the facts of the case because they've actually carried on the investigation. Ideally speaking, they would be the proper authority to take it to its logical conclusion. I mean, if you already have, that would again save you from trying to explain to an officer who's not acquainted with the background, not only what you want to bring to exonerate yourself, but also explain what happened during the investigation, especially if they both, spring out of the same fountain. So I think somehow there needs to be consolidation on this aspect. Perhaps uh, the council needs to sit together, or some legislation needs to come in where there is more standardization across the board, because I think it will benefit both the government and the taxpayers.
Thank you for explaining this, Aditya. I'll go to Advocate Sachit Jolly for his intervention.
Thank you, Tarun. See, Tarun, I'll take a minute to step back on why this section 6(2)(b) was there. As Aditya said in his opening comments, that look, we have a very unique, and Mr. Nangia also alluded to it, that we have a very unique GST model. In most of the countries, you have a GST levied by one center, and then if in principalities or states you want to distribute, you do it domestically. But what we have done is we've created two institutions to levy GST, a state and a center, because we want to keep the federal structure going. Now, in a GST, really, that can't, both this khichdi or this hybrid model can't really work, according to me. So, therefore, in order to allay apprehensions that both authorities will not, harass you, recover from you, etc., that's the genesis of 6(2)(b). You really can't. But now, the GST authority's position, which these couple of high courts seem to have accepted, like I said, Rajasthan, Bombay, even Allahabad, maybe I think in one of the matters, that look, you have to look at proceedings when a show cause is issued. It defeats the whole purpose. It defeats the whole purpose of the act. So that's completely, according to me, contrary to the whole purpose of 6(2)(b). That's one. Now, on the practical side of it, look, we were dealing with this situation where I had a client who had a unit in Allahabad. He used to buy goods in Allahabad, semi-process them, send them to, let's say, Nashik, finally process it, and then sell to a third party in Karnataka or maybe anywhere in the country. It started with a search in Allahabad. Now, basis the inputs that Allahabad got, they passed it on to the center. The center then raided me in Nashik. The local authorities in Nashik then got whiff of it. They then raided my unit in Nashik. Now, you had three authorities raiding me for the same thing. The businessman went to the court and said, please, I'm happy, let this go to a central authority which can examine the input side, the output side, everything in a cohesive manner. To Aditya's point, it will also bring in efficiencies for the government. It can only lead to a higher revenue if it is done, if the investigation is done in a cohesive manner. But unfortunately, the positions which were taken in that matter were that no, we are examining, all three of us are examining different subject matters. Now, how can there be different subject matter? Your input is one, processing is one, output goes there. It's one chain. It's not that I have bought in a plastic bottle and I have sold, a computer. I can't make a computer out of a plastic bottle. If I bought a plastic bottle, I've filled it and I sold water. So that's the really gamut of things which you have to consider. But I mean, I leave it to the wisdom of the legislature and the board that they need to step in and clear this out. Otherwise, the only people laughing at all this will be lawyers in courts. There is nobody else who's happier than this.
Thank you so much, Senior Advocate Sachit Jolly, for explaining this case to us. We will sort of take now 10 minute advice for businessmen who are currently facing dual investigations. We'll start with Mr. Rakesh Nagar.
So my advice to all of them is this: there is a law on your side. The law clearly says you can have a line and you take advantage of that. The chances are that with so many judgments coming in the favor of the taxpayer, the courts will, you'll find a lot of judgments on your side basically to rely on that. Where you can rely on that, okay, a parallel dual proceedings cannot be carried on. That's very important message. And there are umpteen court, like Sachit mentioned, there are 4 or 5 high court cases right now which are before me, which are all ruled in favor of the taxpayer. They cannot go for multiple proceedings. And the intent was never, there cannot be an intent you have two authorities on the same issue, proceedings going at a different part of the country actually. I think it doesn't make any sense. It's devoid of any reasonableness actually. So this is one thing, but only one thing happening is why not government bring more clarity to it? I give you a small example. Why can't they define what is the meaning of proceedings and what is the better subject matter? Give an example in clear. Can't they have more better coordination and mechanism between the center and the states? Can they amend clearly the rules to avoid multiple audits? Why multiple audits are allowed? Why can't they stop it at the first stage? Can issue the joint notices. Both the center for the same SC can help you to have one proceedings going on. And we always, I think, a single proceedings and a single authority, all these cases, every day, the strict enforcement of CBIC letter number, which was issued on October 2018, which recommends a single proceeding and single authority for one issue. The law is clear from Act, the law is clear from rules, from the judgment, from various high courts. There cannot be multiple proceedings. Courts will be on your side in majority of the cases, until unless it's a procedure matter, until unless it's a different matter. But strict matter, the court will be on your side.
Thank you for explaining this. Advocate Aditya Ajawkar, your advice to businessmen facing parallel proceedings under the GST.
So my first advice would be that usually when such a thing happens, the first thing the businessman would do is to run to a lawyer. Okay, which is fine. But it is incredibly important, according to me, for the person, whoever the person is who's corresponding with the authority, first and foremost, to bring to their attention that such a parallel proceeding is going on. And in your reply, furnish copies of those proceedings and the show cause. Because usually what will happen is that if you go to court without doing that, the court will say, why did you not inform the authority in the first place? This is a practical problem that may be, make that a businessman may come across, especially if the lawyer is not seasoned in tax, because this is a very tax thing, I think, making sure everything is put before the officer, because the officer has tremendous powers. Another thing is, of course, we shouldn't be rushing to dual proceedings. The concept of dual proceedings, because I think we'll have to figure this out also. If two notices are issued by each authority, one is under 73 for determination of tax, while the other one is 74, which is fraudulent, transaction, whether that would count as different proceedings. I mean, I think the law with respect to this is still going to be tested to a large extent. So as Rakesh ji said, if the matter is very simple, if you fall within the straitjacket formula, please go for it. Another thing is 62B, according to me, is a jurisdictional issue, right? So even if you do not go to the High Court in a writ, please taking it up in appeal. If it is something that you have not taken up before the officer, when you file your first appeal, please take it up. It can be taken up, according to me, at a later stage also, because if the proceedings have happened, they have happened. And I think practically speaking, a lot of people tend to want to hide things more from the tax authorities than disclose them. And I don't think that would be, the call of the hour.
Point well taken, Aditya. I'll go to Senior Advocate Sachit Jolly for his intervention.
Yeah. So, I'll circle back to where we started. There are 2 points to be noted in 62B, this whole provision. And one, there must be a pending proceeding. And 2, it should pertain to the same subject matter. I think the clients must first decipher, is it really the same subject matter? And is it really for the same period? And are there any pending so-called proceedings? And the proceedings may differ from state to state because some courts believe some proceedings are not proceedings, while in some other courts, the court may believe that, so it's also a little bit of geography may help you in deciphering whether you need to take further precipitative action. But I also, agree with Aditya that, look, don't rush to the court straight away. First, you need to apprise the officer. That's step number one. And not just the officer, his immediate commissioner also, if required, that look, this will tantamount to a overreach which is not permitted by Act. If required, write to the DGGI. There are some investigations, DGGI intervenes and has intervened in the past. So don't be shy of approaching right to the highest level that something has gone wrong. Rushing to a writ court should be a method of last resort. I'm not a big fan of jumping to the writ court on everything. Once you've exhausted all remedies, and still if the authorities are insisting on a dual assessment or a dual audit, in that case, of course, the doors of all lawyers are always open.
Point very well taken. In the next show on this topic, we will maybe discuss specific cases which are important precedents, which could help a lot of viewers and businessmen who watch the show. Specifically because this is an informed case, the promoter himself is informed in such kind of cases. So they would like to know. I would like to thank Rakesh Nangia, Chairman of Nangia Anderson India Private Limited, Advocate Aditya Ajgaonkar, who joins us from Mumbai, Senior Advocate Sachin Jolly. Appreciate your time and thank you for explaining this subject in detail, and looking forward to see you on the next show. Appreciate your joining us. Thank you so very much.
Thank you so much, Tarun.
Thank you so much.
For more such videos, subscribe to the Newsx YouTube channel, hit the bell icon.